If someone is concerned about the climate crisis, the question I would suggest they ask is, what am I best able to do about it? Instead of just jumping in and doing what other people are best able to do. Public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the immense power of the fossil fuel industry. Everybody nods. Okay, and then to drive that point home, I'll say the fossil fuel industry knows this, which is why it spends hundreds of millions of dollars trying to shape public opinion with disinformation. People are starved for hopeful news. They're not going to act if they don't have hope, right? You think it's hopeless, then why do anything, right? So that's an important part of what has to be done. If you search climate apps in the app stores, you'll find primarily apps that help you count your carbon footprint or make lifestyle changes. At the time I did Climate Action Now, nobody that I knew of was trying to bring about systemic change. And by that, I mean legislation, policy, regulation, things that can accelerate climate change much more fastly than individual action.
Hi, Brett. Thank you very much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Climate Action Now?
Well, hi, Chris, and thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today. Yeah, sure. I'm, as you said, Brett Walter. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Climate Action Now. I founded it we launched our Climate Action Now app on Earth Day 2021. I had been working on the app for a couple of years before that. I made my career in Silicon Valley as a software designer and a software executive and an entrepreneur, and spent most of my life chasing shiny objects in Silicon Valley. And then along came President Trump. He took the United States out of the Paris Agreement, and that was kind of the last straw for me. And that inspired me to proceed with an idea I'd had for a couple of years, which was to create this app to make it very easy for people to take climate action on their phones. And not lifestyle changes. I mean, if you search climate apps in the app stores, you'll find primarily apps that help you count your carbon footprint or make lifestyle changes. At the time I did Climate Action Now, nobody was focused on trying to bring about, that I knew of, was trying to bring about systemic change. And by that, I mean legislation, policy, regulation, things that can accelerate climate change much more fastly than individual action. So up until Trump withdrawing us, Obama had tried hard, was doing some executive orders that were reasonable, but Trump reversed all of that. So I felt, well, okay, I have to get involved, do what I can. My hypothesis was that if I made it very easy for people to take climate action, more people would, and they would take more action. And that proved to be the case.
Curious, obviously the drive to do it was there because of Trump leaving Paris Agreement, but what gave you the conviction to actually build something from scratch rather than just joining another organization and trying to change that from within?
Well, people ask, and this is the right question, if someone is concerned about the climate crisis, the question I would suggest they ask is, what am I best able to do about it? And instead of just jumping in and doing what other people are best able to do. So for me, I ask that question, and my special talent is that over the course of my career, I have been able to create software that people love. Software is one of the few things that humans do that scales or can scale. And if you join an existing organization, you're going to do whatever it is they do. It's probably going to be just what you can do as an individual. Whereas software could potentially scale and be used by millions of people literally overnight, right? And so I thought that I could have a much bigger impact if I created software that enabled other people to take action.
Why was it you started your own app rather than joining a different climate app that was doing something else and trying to change that one to the direction that you felt they should be going in?
Well, I started, the interview by telling you I've been an entrepreneur most of my career. And if you've ever worked with entrepreneurs, probably the thing they hate most is working for somebody else. So that's just really not an option for me. I want to go, if I see a goal, I want to go straight for it. I don't want to have to convince a bunch of other people who have their own agendas and their own priorities, to do it my way. That's just a waste of time. So why not do it myself?
I find Climate Action Now interesting because it talks like a non-profit, but you obviously made a conscious choice to avoid going the non-profit route. What were the core reasons behind that decision?
Well, a couple reasons, and it was a big question for me. As I was starting out, I was conscious. I went and interviewed some people asking this very question. Well, should I do this as a nonprofit? Should I do it as a for-profit? And, ultimately the reason that I did it as a for-profit was first and foremost, in the United States, there's multiple classifications for nonprofits, and the classification determines what that nonprofit is able to do. By far the most popular and almost ubiquitous nonprofit is what's called a 501c3. And these are organizations that can offer, they don't pay taxes, which is a feature of all the nonprofits. But an additional feature of the 501c3 is that donors can get a tax deduction by donating to the nonprofit. And that's why most nonprofits are 501c3s. Now, that benefit of that organization comes with strings attached by the government. So in this case, where the 501c3s are limited in the kind and amount of lobbying that they can do. They're not entirely prohibited, but it's pretty technical. It is limited. And rather than just kind of deal with it and try to figure, there's formulas, it's very complicated, it's very hard to make sure that you're in compliance. So basically most C3s, they just don't do it. They don't get involved in lobbying. They'll declare that they have an educational mission, and then they don't have to worry about that. To me, the climate crisis is so important. I wanted to be absolutely free to lobby as much as I wanted, right? But I just didn't really know the nonprofit world. I knew the for-profit world. I raised all kinds of money, angel money, corporate venture. I was much more kind of sure-footed, I would say, in that arena. And I also have a track. I had been able, with the companies I founded, it had built up subscription revenue streams, were profitable. And I figured I didn't want to, this is the other problem with being a nonprofit. The part of it that most people don't think about. You start nonprofits, they jump in, they love it, they're mission oriented, right? And then they find out they have to spend 90% of their time begging for money, which nobody really enjoys. Another reason that was in my mind for going for profit was I had hopes, like everybody who starts an organization, that it's going to go big, go viral, go international. And I thought I would want to have access to, I thought as a for-profit able to offer equity, I would have access to a much larger pool of money, mainly from investors. And then I also wanted to be able to offer stock options to my employees. And of course, in a nonprofit, that doesn't exist. So that's one of the benefits. I mean, that's the world I lived in. That's what I was most familiar with. But the primary reason was I wanted no handcuffs. But I did think it was it's a good question, Chris, and I think it was a consequential one. And I still don't know whether I made the right choice, to be honest with you. I mean, there are pros and cons, to both. But as you said, we look like a nonprofit. We smell like a nonprofit. I don't take a salary. I never have. That's not my motivation, to make money. My motivation is to have the biggest possible impact that I can.
That fact that you do feel like a nonprofit, even though you're not, does that make partnerships or funding more difficult?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, Chris, I don't know the answer to that question. It's something I wonder. People don't typically tell you the truth, right? If they don't return your email or you ask, they won't really tell you why, whether they do something or don't something. I have been able to raise, most of the money was from my own family, but I have another roughly $1 million from investors. These are what are called impact investors. And so these are people who I think their primary motivation is to have an impact, but if they can make money doing it, why not? So I have been able to raise money. Could I have gotten more donors? Well, if I'd been a 501c3, yes, but then I wouldn't have been able to have the impact that I want to have. And as a C4, there's no particular advantage that I can, from a fundraising point of view, I don't see any particular advantage to being a C4. That's a relatively small population of donors who are willing to forego the tax deductions in order to support an impact organization. As far as partnerships go, This is something I wonder. I mean, I have formed partnerships with a number of climate organizations, not as many as I thought. I thought that if I built a tool that demonstrably made people exponentially more impactful than conventional advocacy tools, that the environmental movement organizations would be the path to my door. No, that didn't happen. Hasn't happened yet, but I don't think that had to do with the fact that we were a for-profit. I think it had to do with the fact that if decisions get made at the senior level, right? You know, you got it. So in a few cases, I was able to get through to senior people at some pretty big nonprofits, and they were interested. And then what they do is they ask their IT person or some junior person to come in and evaluate, right? And then the IT guy looks at this and he goes, "Gee, this is going to be work. I don't want to do this." He's already spent years, creating whatever tech stack they have. And now here's yet another thing he's got to integrate. And, you know, I don't know many people who are looking to increase their workloads. So I think sort of the sort of inertia issue, having an infrastructure, not wanting to mess with it. I mean, it's totally understandable, right? Especially if you're a bigger nonprofit and you've invested a lot in advocacy tools and customer resource management tools and content management tools and so on. You've set up a system and you just generally don't want to mess with it. I probably need to back up a second and let me just say what is really unique about the Climate Action Now app relative to the standard conventional advocacy tools is that people who use the app take exponentially more actions than people using conventional tools. And by conventional tool, I mean, let's say you're you're a member of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club sends you 4 or 5 emails a week, and 3 or 4 of them are donation requests. One of them might be a call to action, and that will be a link, a button that takes you to a web form where you then, sign a petition or send a message to your senator. And then you're done. You know, the I don't know about Sierra Club's open rates, but most organizations, maybe they have a 15, 20% open rate on their emails. And then maybe they're going to get a few percent of those people who open. So less than 1% typically are going to actually respond to your call to action. And then and of those who do, they do the web form and they're done for the day, for the week, whereas in the Climate Action Now app, the average can-doer, as we call them, CAN for Climate Action Now, doer, can-doer. And by the way, it was our engineer who came up with that name for characterizing. So if you think nerds are not creative and have no marketing sense, well, many of them don't, but some do. So I love it, can-doers, right? The average can-doer takes 10 actions a day. And if you go into the app, and there's a button at the bottom that says community, and you click on that, you'll see all the actions that people are taking. And you will see the same person taking action after action after action. I never have to set this up. It's always that way. And why is that the case? It's because the app makes it so easy for people to send messages to their political leaders, business leaders, civic leaders, and so on. I mean, literally 2 or 3 touches and boom, you've sent a well-researched, well-written, personalized message, to a decision maker or an influencer of some kind. And so people get in there and they do it over and over and over again. When we launched Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, did a pilot with 3 of their chapters, and they documented that their supporters with the app took 29 times more actions than people using the conventional advocacy tools. And so the secret sauce here is I succeeded in my original goal, which was to make it super, super easy, right, for people. And the hypothesis was that if we made it really easy and rewarding for people to take climate action, they would. And they did. And we've documented that again and again. So why don't other climate organizations say, hey, we want that too? Well, I think, the biggest reason I think is if they're a big organization, they've already got their tech stack in place and they don't want to mess with something new.
What have you learned about turning that initial user intent when they actually first download the app into sustained action? How is it you keep people engaged from that very first I guess, download?
Well, I believe from the very beginning this was the most important question. How do you keep people engaged? And so I consulted, with behavioral psychologists and did some reading. I had the goal of making the app addictive, and so I went to school. I literally went to school. There's a professor at Stanford, Dr. BJ Fogg, who he put out there that he was going to do a free behavioral course for people in climate. And so I did it. I'd actually already designed the app by then, but I went in and studied it. And then I consulted with another very prominent behavioral psychologist. The first guy, the Dr. Fogg, I mean, he's the guy, he's literally written the book on how you make technology addictive. So eventually I showed him the app and I talked with him about it. And at the end, I gave him a demo and I said, Dr. Fogg, is there something else that I should be doing, with this? And he thought about it. He says, well, there were a few things he would tweak, but basically he said, no, you're hitting all the right points. And then not only that, Chris, but he then volunteered to do a video testimonial saying why the app design was so good. And not only that, but he did the first one and he didn't quite like how he did it, so he did a second one. So I have two videos. And not only that, Chris, but he got my name wrong in both of them. So that's okay. I'm not doing it for me, right? So I had this validation for probably the premier behavioral psychologist in the United States saying this is great. So I, I did these terms like gamification and rewards. I mentioned earlier that the community thread in the app where you can see the other actions that other people are taking. And there's a little like, a thumbs up there. There's also a way to share. If you see something, what I do every day when I take my 10 actions or more, I scroll down through the community thread and I just thumbs up people. Now, if they have agreed to receive notifications from the app, then when I give them a thumbs up, then they get a notification on their phone saying, Brett, like that you just did that. This sounds, I probably shouldn't say this, but the way I think about it is that I'm dispensing dopamine because, every time I hit that thumbs up, I'm dispensing a little bit of dopamine. And I'm sorry, this is just how we are. This is how humans are, right? We're social animals. We love approval. We crave approval. We hate criticism. And that really just drives a ton of human behavior. So I don't think there's any harm in this. And I want to encourage people to do it.
Curious about the monetization of it then. So obviously people are getting into the app, they're getting engaged. You've said before that in terms of you've had funding, but it's been mostly self-financed and you've moved into more monetization so that it can be self-supporting. You've got a really organic model. People don't have to buy, but some choose to. How is it you arrived at that strategy?
Well, I had to make money, right? Everybody needs money, right? So you spend a lot of your time asking yourself, how can I do it? I wanted to create it was very clear to me, and as it is to many people, that the gold standard revenue stream is subscription, right? Because then you have a relatively stable and predictable stream of revenue, which is immensely helpful, as opposed to kind of one-off things like one-off donations, right? So I needed to fund it. I'm working for free, but I have younger people who are not in a position they could do that and need a salary. So I needed to, generate a revenue stream. And so I created a subscription product. And the name of it is the first subscription product we created, I call the Planet Saving Subscription. And basically, we will take when you subscribe, you can choose a tier, a level, and then depending on your tier, every month on your behalf, we'll plant a certain number of trees, we'll avoid a certain amount of CO2 emissions, and we will preserve and protect forever a certain amount of habitat, land, and conservation. And so I call that a planet saving subscription and offer it. And I keep some of the money to fund our operation. It's completely transparent how this whole thing works. And then every month, planet saving subscribers get a certificate saying, last month, thus far, you have planted X number of trees, you've offset X number of carbon, and so on, right? So that was our primary subscription revenue stream. I invented additional ones after that, but that's still the primary one. And I'm super proud that we don't sell swag. I'm always stunned when I get a climate organization asking me to buy yet another T-shirt. Does the world really need more T-shirts? I mean, I'm seriously, does it really need more tote bags and teddy bears? I mean, I don't know. So I don't I don't like to rub it in people's faces, but I'm pretty proud of the fact that we don't create anything except trees and solar panels, and we practice what we preach. But I understand these other organizations have to raise money, and so better that than any number of other things that they could do. So it's okay.
So what made you decide on making an optional thing as opposed to if you subscribe, you get extra actions to be able to take or extra likes that you can give or more use of the community, something like that?
When,
Almost like
when I was
like a freemium model.
when I was when I was user testing the app, I had some things like that, but what I found in the feedback was that people preferred something tangible. I mean, you could give people digital trees or extra points, or I don't think offering them more actions to take is going to be, I don't think that would be a good incentive. Right now, they have an endless stream of actions, right? So that's the most important thing. So I don't want to put any brakes or limits on that, on the number of actions that people can take. But I did, when I was trying to decide what sort of incentives to offer people and inducements to subscribe, the feedback that really struck me was that they weren't so sold on the idea of digital rewards. I mean, they really wanted something tangible. So I went to a lot of trouble to find a lot of work to find tangible things that we could offer people. And planting trees is one of those things. And that's something that almost everybody regards as a positive thing. I mean, trees have a tremendous brand. Trees are the best brand in the world.
What does scaling the app look like for you? Is it more about user numbers? Is it more about having higher incomes so that you can scale more, so that you can have more impact? Talk to me about what that scale looks like.
Well, the number one question that I get from people who use the app is, hey, Brett, I got the app. I'm sending messages to my legislators, urging them to pass laws or offer incentives, but is it making a difference? And am I making a difference? Right. And there's some pathos in that question, because what they're really saying is, I don't think I'm making a difference. They don't say it that way, but they ask the question. And for the first couple of years, I would give them a link to some research done by the Congressional Management Foundation that had surveyed congressional staffers asking, how do you influence legislators? And personalized emails are like number 2 on the list. I mean, the only thing better than sending someone a personalized email is visiting with them in person on behalf of a large organization of voters. But personalized emails is number 2 or 3, but it's even higher up than phone calls. People assume the phone call is more influential. And then you just go down the list, petitions and other things. So I would send people links to this research. I would give them kind of common sense arguments. But eventually, about a year and a half ago, I finally kind of cracked the code on how to answer that question. And this sort of answers your question too, Chris. I say to people, public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the immense power of the fossil fuel industry. And Chris, just like you, everybody nods. When I say that to people, 5% of the people will nod in agreement. Public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the immense power of the fossil fuel industry. Everybody nods. Okay, and then to drive that point home, I'll say the fossil fuel industry knows this, which is why it spends hundreds of millions of dollars trying to shape public opinion with disinformation. And then everybody nods. And then I say, even dictators, and then I really want to drive, the final nail in the coffin, right? Even dictators like Xi Jinping in China and Vladimir Putin in Russia know this. which is why they go to so much trouble to control the media. Everybody is terrified of public opinion because they know that public opinion can sweep everything in its path. Okay, so having answered the question in this way, does my opinion matter? Public opinion rules, right? My opinion alone doesn't matter. And you can't argue with that. That's true. Any opinion alone doesn't matter, but you're not alone. When you're using the app, go look in the community thread. Thousands of other people are sending thousands of messages. And this all adds up and it really does make a difference.
What do you feel is the biggest challenge to the app scaling and getting more users involved, getting more people to join it? Something that's, I guess, controllable or something that you can control?
Well, everybody who's worked in climate knows that this is not fun. This is the big, scary thing. I mean, climate change is a big, scary thing. Most people would rather not think about it. And so, it's not like most people wake up every morning and go, hey, I'm going to go, I'm going to go solve climate change. Today we do have hardcore app users who do this. One guy in particular, he sends 70 messages a day and has been doing it for a year and a half. But this is a sliver. I mean, this isn't the usual human reaction to problems like this. I mean, it's a big, scary problem, and most people don't think they can do anything about it, so they just don't think about it, or they deny its existence, and which is unfortunately where we are now with the current administration. So the biggest barrier, I think, is human nature. Some people have, for whatever reason, just have the crusader gene, right? They want to go out and do good in the world just because they want to, right? They're not the norm. I'm sorry to say. Most people are really just kind of looking out for number one. What affects them personally, directly in the near term? And so if they see that it affects them personally, directly in the near term, then they may be motivated to do something about it. So I think that's one of the challenges, is how do you make climate change direct, personal, and immediate? And if you can do that, and that's where extreme weather events can be very effective, but that's what you have to do, right? The fossil fuel industry, the Exxon new thing, right? Fossil fuel industry has known about this problem. And what did they do when they found out about it? Well, they did what every big industry does when they find out their product is causing harm. They cover it up. They put profit over people. I mean, that's the other part of the human nature problem. The climate change problem is a human nature problem. I mean, the thing that's preventing us from solving the problem is fundamentally human nature. And that's what we have to get around. We have to figure out how to work with our own limitations as people. That's just my opinion. I don't hear many kind of saying that, but that's my view of it.
Well, I think there's a couple of pieces there. I like what you said about making climate change direct, personal, and immediate. I think whenever you're speaking to people about climate change, they don't understand, or the regular person doesn't understand carbon footprint, things like that, because it just feels so amorphous. It feels like nothing that's directly impactable by them. But if you're talking about the fish in their rivers, being able to swim in their rivers safely, being able to till their land and actually grow food to support their family, like that actually hits people, right?
Right.
And the other side of it is, I think, and I see this starting to change now, which is fantastic, but a lot of the climate change messaging has been around fear, has been around negative emotions. And the majority of people tend not to make changes due to negative emotions, especially. And I think that's a big part of the reason why climate denial has become such a big thing, because it's easier to deny something as a problem than actually face up to the fact that it is going to be scary and that you could do something small about it. That level of responsibility, I think a lot of people just aren't ready for.
Right.
But that's my opinion. And
No. That's an educated opinion, and it's one that I share, and that's one reason why we created a newsletter on Substack, which we call Your Daily Dose of Climate Hope. And your listeners, if you want to go onto Google and Google Substack Daily Dose of Climate Hope, you'll find us, and every day we put into your inbox a short piece of hopeful news, something great that's being done somewhere. It could be new technology, or, a solar farm just being, developed, along with an action that you can take in the app or on the Climate Action Now website. And this thing has just taken off like this. I mean, after 9 months, I have as many subscribers to that as I have to my standard newsletter after 4 years. People are really desperate for good news. So we said, hey, this is cool. Let's do a weekly dose of climate hope. And so that's every Sunday we send out a recap of positive events from the prior week. And then we have a monthly dose of climate hope where we interview, doing what you're doing, we have an interview with a change maker, somebody who's doing something. We just did one with an Oxford economist who's been studying the energy transition in Chile and Pakistan and other developing nations. And it was like people were so, I mean, everyone was uplifted. Everyone who saw this interview, because I'm just saying people are starved for hopeful news, and hopeful news, they're not going to act if they don't have hope, right? If you think it's hopeless, then why do anything, right? So that's an important part of what has to be done. And the other thing I just want to add, there's a former Madison Avenue ad guy, John Marshall is his name. And I think his organization's called Potential Energy. John was our Madison Avenue ad agency guy and a by the numbers ad agency guy, advertiser. And then I guess his teenage son to him a few years ago said, well, Dad, what are you going to do about this climate change thing? And he took it to heart and he stopped his ad work and he decided to he asked himself the same question that I asked myself. What's the best thing? What are you best able to do better? Well, John's a master at processing data and understanding how people process information and make decisions and so on. I think he's considered, on most people, he'd be their short list of climate communications experts. And so what John has done lots of research around the world, and he claims that the most powerful message that you can make, that you can give to inspire people to take action is around the theme, preserve what you love, protect what you love. That's what motivates when they see that they're going to lose something that they love. That's what motivates people, to take action. Now, we're losing an enormous amount potentially of things that we love from climate change and from the destruction of the natural world. I mean, I think many, many people of the natural world. We're very conscious about that at Climate Action Now, trying to bring that sort of messaging. We just 2 nights ago did an action party. We call them action parties, where we'll do an interview, an online event, and we'll interview a panel of experts on a topic. And then in advance of that event, we queue up a number of actions for people to take during the event with the app. So you're not just listening and then going home and forgetting about it. You're actually taking action, even as you're learning, right? And this was called Save the Ice. So we got 3 phenomenal experts on loss of the ice caps and the glaciers, what was happening and why that was bad, what were solutions and so on. One of the speakers, he's a genius on ice policy. He said that people don't realize that 50 years from now, there will be no sandy beaches left in the world. Think about that. No sandy beaches. It's just going to be mud and rock, right? If the ocean comes up 2-3 feet, which is what the IPCC is forecasting, by the end of the century, and that's a very, very conservative forecast, but that's the official IPCC forecast, 2 to 3 feet. And it depends, but it's going to be at least that and probably a lot more. But sea level goes up that much, you can kiss goodbye to sandy beaches. And I mean, look, you're shaking your head. Was my reaction, Is there any person on the world who doesn't love a sandy beach? If we don't get a handle,
heard that before.
We don't get a handle on this problem.
Yeah, I think people don't realize just how much we're going to lose and how far reaching it is. My final question for you, Brett, is if you had one piece of advice for another founder in sustainability, what would it be?
Well, it would be the same advice you'd give anybody who's founding any for-profit company, which is make sure you're solving a problem that people want solved. It's the old will the dogs eat the dog food thing. I did my career in Silicon Valley, and I used to say to people, any given moment in Silicon Valley, there are tens of thousands of engineers who think they are going to change the world, right? Their software, their product, whatever is going to change the world. And at the end of the day, they'll be lucky if their market are left-handed Swiss dentists. But many of them won't ever even finish the product. This is really, really hard, is to figure out what, and not just assume that you know. And people won't tell you, right? Steve Jobs famously said, you can't do surveys that will tell you what people want. So we sort of don't have the answer. So the minimum viable product is an excellent concept. Just do the minimum viable. I didn't do it. I tried, but not, I didn't try. I just threw everything. I just did everything that I could think of to motivate people. And there's features in the app that nobody uses. There's teams and rivalries, and there's a number of features that nobody uses, but I wanted to do everything that I could. So that's not your usual thing, but figure out what you think is the minimum viable. Do the minimum that you need to do in order to validate that there's actually a market for what you're doing. And then keep your ears to the ground and learn from your customers, what works and what doesn't work, and be prepared to pivot. And with any startup, it's never a straight line from point A to point B, right? It's zigs and zags. Be prepared to have your gut handed to you on a platter every few months. I mean, this is not for sissies. Starting companies, persistence, determination, creativity, think deeply and rigorously about what you're doing. It's a great book. I encourage everybody to read it. It's How Big Things Get Built. I think that's the name of it. And his principal, or I would say to me, anyway, his principal piece of advice is do slow planning and fast building. Really kind of do your homework. And I think that is super true, because you'll talk to so many entrepreneurs, this is a great idea, and they talk themselves into thinking the world wants it, and they assume the world wants it because they want it, right? And they throw themselves into it, and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and years later they find out, well, not really. Or maybe they got lucky, right? But so do your homework. Spend an extra hour, just one extra hour, doing a Google or a ChatGPT search. Has anybody ever done this before, right? But just find out if anybody's ever done this before, and you'll probably find somebody has, or some number of people have. And if you can't, get an interview with them. I mean, assuming they did it and they're not a big successful company, get an interview with them. Find out. You see if you can find out why it didn't work, if it didn't work. Anyway, do your homework. An extra hour of work will save you hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of your life.
Brett, how can people get involved in climate action now? How can they download the app? Tell us a bit about that.
First, take your phone, go to the App Store, Google Play or Apple iOS, search for Climate Action Now, 3 words, and you'll find it, and then download it, create an account, and off you go. And everybody says it's very easy to use, 5-star rating in both stores. The principal thing people say about it is it's super easy. It's also a great way to learn about climate, because what my team does is create thousands of well-researched, well-written messages that you can send to decision makers. And just reading those messages will educate you about all kinds. And that's what everybody says. Gee, I'm learning more about because you're going to send a message. You want to know what message you're sending, right? So you'll bother to read the message, and they say, gee, I didn't know that. And we try to be fact-based. We're as fact-based and science-based as we can possibly be. We include citations, links, to reputable sources. And you can, in 2 minutes, while you're standing in line at your favorite coffee shop or waiting for your coffee to brew in the morning, you can set 10 messages off. And this does make a difference. Public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the massive power of the fossil fuel industry. Your opinion matters. It's your superpower. This tool, Climate Action Now, lets you amplify your power. Please do that. We have a long way. We've made a lot of progress, but we still have a long ways to go.
Brett, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Lots of great insights there for people. Yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.